The movie was so far ahead of its time, and the thing that I actually really loved about it was that it wasn't just a great science fiction movie, it wasn't just a great man versus machine movie, it was actually a love story at the center of it. And that entire movie for me really revolved around one line, which was when Kyle Reese looks at Sarah Connor and said, "I traveled across time for you, Sarah." And one of the things that we really try to, as a filmmaker and as a producer, is always talk about what's the great character story that you can then wrap inside the gigantic canvas, which to me is really then where Terminator 2 went to. When you look at that, and that movie is very much it's a father-son dynamic, and when Arnold actually lowers into the steel, I was crying like a little kid when I saw, well, I was a little kid when I saw that movie. And, but it was just incredibly beautiful, incredibly emotional, but also had groundbreaking visual effects. The scope and scale and the practical stunts in the movie were bigger than I had ever seen at the time, and really bigger and were truly the largest that had ever been done at the time, and very much revolutionized what we think of today as the modern tentpole blockbuster film. And so from that standpoint, to be able to work on it is just an incredible privilege. Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese are two very different characters than you saw in the original movie. The Kyle Reese is much more similar to the character that Michael Biehn played, but this Sarah Connor is much closer to the Lyndall Hamilton you saw in Terminator 2. And what you come to realize and understand is that Guardian, who Arnold Schwarzenegger plays in this movie, was actually a Terminator that's sent back in time to 1973, who saved Sarah Connor from a T-1000 who tries to kill her parents. And so since she was 9 years old, she was raised by a machine. She has had no human contact. The only thing she knows is that these machines took her family, and she has literally spent her entire life being raised for this moment to save Kyle Reese because of the responsibility if she has to fall in love with him. So the dynamic they have in the beginning is much more of an arranged marriage, to where Sarah has been told, you have to fall in love with this guy in order to have John Connor in order to save the world. And that is a reality that she fundamentally rejects. She does not want to do it. Kyle Reese comes into the position of the woman you're going back for, she's a waitress. She's not going to know you need her help. She's going to think you're crazy and you have to convince her. And then when they both show up, they realize that this is not the Sarah Connor that Kyle Reese thought he was going back to save, and she is very much a Sarah Connor who is in the driver's seat, and you really see them actually collide over the course of the movie. And then through those interactions, through action, and through basically everything that occurs throughout the film, they end up getting in the same place and actually falling in love, thus asking the question, is this really just a closed loop where everything happens again, or are they going to get to a place to where everything really can change? Well, first, a lot of people have asked us, there was no version of Terminator without Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, Arnold is the Terminator. It's his most iconic role, and he literally plays it perfectly. I mean, he has slipped back into this role like he never left it, and every single moment of him in this movie, it is just, I mean, one of the greatest moments for us on the set was when we shot Guardian's introduction, and you actually got to look around at the entire crew. And the age range is early 20s to 60, and everybody's just grinning ear to ear because the Terminator is on set. So for us, there was never a version without Arnold. For me, it was always Emilia Clarke. There was never a conversation. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and one of the things that Sarah Connor has to have is an incredibly strong inner strength, which is just something that can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. And watching her work on Game of Thrones, for me, it was simply that Sarah Connor. We had to run a casting process, as you always do, and it was really, really simple. She came in and read, and everybody looked at it and was like, that's it, that's Sarah. And her dedication to this role, the emotional depths, the charm, the humor, but also just the incredible strength makes her a very different Sarah Connor than we've seen, but she's absolutely fantastic in this movie. This version of John, as you will see, it's one of the most demanding roles, if not the most demanding role in the movie. And the spectrum and the arc that John Connor goes not only through this movie, but over the course of the trilogy, requires an actor who is a true chameleon who can truly do anything. And Jason Clarke is just one of those brilliant actors who can play simply any range. And his performance in this movie is wonderful. I mean, literally, actually, when we shot, there's a big reveal scene in the parking structure, and Arnold actually came up to me at the end of the day and was like, "David, Jason's really good," and I was like, "Yes, I know he is." In BH, when you see him, the way he's actually able to move and literally with his body and the physicality that he has in this role is phenomenal and incredibly creepy and not something that you would ever want to encounter. And he's also just a great actor with a lot of depth who we had a relationship with. And I literally remember thinking, well, it's only a couple of weeks. I have no idea if he'll want to do it. And we called him, and it turned out that it was actually one of the franchises that he loved and was kind of like the ultimate dream for him to be in Terminator. And so at the end, he's like, I would have done it for nothing. I just wanted to be in this movie. Massive action. The scope and scale of the movie is gigantic. It's nonstop. I mean, you pretty much buckle up because the movie starts with a massive future war and it does not slow down. But it's also got a lot of heart. It's actually got a lot of emotion. There's a wonderful love story in the center of it. There's a great father-daughter dynamic, and there really is a great family story in there as well. So it's really got, I think, a little bit of everything in there for somebody to, to hopefully be a great ride at the movies.